All right, we got to jump right into it. Recording a reaction episode after what is safely to say very likely going to be the worst Auburn football loss of all time. If not all time, then most definitely in modern football history. I would be pretty safe in assuming that most every listener, this is probably the worst Auburn football loss in their mind for sure. Lifetime, and I don't even know what a clear second place would be as far as a game that Auburn just absolutely had no business losing. So we're going to get right into it. This is the Auburn Daily Show. Host Alex, better known on the socials as Auburn Memes. Of the game yesterday, I was shooting photography as I do on the sideline behind the lens. So understand, per the nature of these episodes here for these recap shows that I like to do, I don't rewatch the game. I kind of get these solo. I like them to be very, I guess you could say, raw, kind of how it felt in the moment. I really want these to kind of encapsulate the emotions that I think a lot of people feel. And that's kind of what we've done all season with it. I've enjoyed it. Seems to be getting decent feedback. And that's kind of how I want to do it. I want these thoughts to be original. I want them to be fresh. I want to be untainted. I try to, look enough up, but I don't try to get too swayed by headlines or articles or any spins. I want it to be just kind of un untainted, uninterrupted, unfazed thoughts that are my own. And it's fun. And I think it tries to encompass a lot about how people feel. And it's just a little bit different because sometimes when you really get to sit down and think about it, get a guest on there, perspective changes, and sometimes it's for the better, sometimes for the worse. But unfortunately, this episode, for anybody out there looking for good news, this probably isn't going to be that. This isn't going to be that happy episode. This isn't going to be the oh, here's how we spin out of this. I mean, you got to call this for what it is. You don't have the worst loss of program history, and it just be something that I'm just kind of sweat that one off. We go out this way. If it had been an SEC loss, I mean, even if it had been a Vanderbilt, you at least can hang your hat on, oh, well, it's an SEC school. This was unprecedented. The spread for this game opened up at I think around 24 points, and we had a space last night, and Brandy had confirmed with us that this game ended. I think it ended at 30. So this spread had been bought up to 30 or 30 and a half points. Auburn was supposed to beat this team by over 4 touchdowns, according to the number in Las Vegas. They lost by 3. So this wasn't some game of, oh, well, even with like the Utah State and the Jacksonville State and the Georgia State, like it was coming down to the ringer. Auburn was playing with their food. They were asleep, which don't get me wrong, they were very much asleep today. They are in some position to where New Mexico State drills some like 60-yard miracle field goal to win this. No, this wasn't some just fluke. They beat Auburn left, right, forward, and backwards. Can't blame the penalties. You can't blame a player. You can't blame the coaches. You blame everybody. Every player on this team that walked on that field during game time, every coach, every assistant. There's nobody who doesn't get a finger pointed at him in this, one way or another. Now, it was like everybody was playing with peanut butter in their shoes. I mean, there were comments all over the place. You could see it at the game. Oh, this person's looking slow. The phrase I saw a lot was they're asleep. They need to wake up. And I thought, okay, they're overlooking. Their confidence was up. New Mexico State dominated time possession. Auburn had 1 3 and out the first quarter. And when they get their second possession with a minute left, and then they get a first down, and then they have to punt the ball immediately after that due to some, sure enough, penalties. But yes, penalties were a factor. But hear me out here. 75 yards of penalties for each team. So by definition, the refs called it even, at least how it would have affected the game. Now the side of this is the stuff that wasn't called, and that can't be ignored. I was shooting in the end zone right where that Javaris Johnson uh, no call pass interference was. I'm not a referee. I don't work in any SEC offices. I don't know how in the world that was not a pass interference when you get two arms and you shove a guy down before the ball gets to him. There were 2 referees sitting there. I don't know what they saw. That was one of the loudest eruptions of boos I have ever heard in that stadium when that was no called. Everybody there saw it. People confirmed on TV that they saw it. And who knows, just saying that just kind of goes to show how that game went. And then also to the fumble that I didn't hear it on TV. I'm not sure if they said that the play was blown dead beforehand. I don't know what the reviewing side of that was. There was a referee standing right there. I don't know how he didn't see that, but I mean that ball. I mean that was clear as day a fumble. So, like I said, I didn't hear the official announcement about that, but that was an absolute wild. That was an absolute wild series right there for how they did not see it, call it, whatever it may have been. um, I'm trying to remember here if the pass that was to VAR that didn't get called a pass interference. I don't think that was. Yeah, that wasn't the same. So yeah, that wasn't this. I was trying to remember if that was the same series that Rivaldo got the touchdown on, but I believe that was a different series. So that could have been some extra points there for Auburn because they'd have gotten the extra yards and probably at very least would have been in field goal range. And there was the one. I mean, the holding calls just came at just some incredibly inopportune times. Uh, I'm Jeremiah Wright was called. Me Miller was called for some. I mean, it was just the holding thing was, and some of those are very tic tacky. But we're not going to get in this game and just nitpick every single penalty. Did it have some effect on the game? Absolutely. Is that why Auburn lost by 3 touchdowns? No. You should be able to handily beat New Mexico State even with some whistles not going your way, and even not getting a fumble that you should have gotten. That a factor, yes, not the reason. And here's the deal where people, oh, this is a good New Mexico State team. It doesn't matter like what like group of 5 Conference USA team jumps trotting in here. There's never a scenario where, oh, that's a game that you lose. For example, Auburn played New Mexico State in last time they played 2012. Well, what do we remember about 2012 Auburn? 3-win team. Worst Auburn team, Auburn history, at least modern Auburn history. Team 2 years removed from a national championship. Team 1 year removed from going back the next year. Obviously, that team had talent. There's other factors there. Auburn beat New Mexico State 42-7 in 2012. Worst Auburn team of all time. Beat New Mexico State. Now, people, oh, well, that New Mexico State team this year is better. I don't want to hear it. I'm sorry. It's just don't try to carry water for. And yes, am I making the joke that this is a playoff team? Absolutely. Was the team in 2012 a one-win New Mexico State team? Yes, they were. But regardless, that was still a horrific Auburn team. This is not a horrific Auburn team. This is an average, maybe below average Auburn team. This team really should be a 7-win team, which would be below average team. A below average team should still handedly beat an above average New Mexico State team. This New Mexico State team, it's not like they're undefeated. This New Mexico State team lost to UMass earlier this season. A UMass team that Auburn already handedly beaten. Now, yeah, transitive property doesn't matter. They've gotten better since then. Well, so has Auburn. And so that's where I'm just sitting there scratching my head of just like, yeah, Auburn has gotten better since then too. There is no excuse. I don't want to hear any angle from anybody of trying to excuse this loss. It's not there. It was the worst for a reason. Now, who do I blame it on? Who do I think had more fault in this than others? I don't know. Maybe that's something we'll kind of get into during the week. Maybe Hugh Freeze was. I'm sure it's a little bit of everybody, but maybe it's a situation of Hugh Freeze is trying to ride this recruiting momentum. Maybe he wasn't as focused as much on the game plan like he kind of said he had been. Maybe the players had a false sense of confidence. Maybe they're looking ahead of the Iron Bowl. Maybe certain coaches are kind of up. Well, I'm not going to have this job next year. Maybe they're starting to check out. I don't know what it is. I don't have any inside information on this. I'm just speculating at any of the what ifs and possibilities and so on. But it is absolutely crazy, too, that Hugh Freeze was favored by this New Mexico State team last year by 24 points, and this year, at least where the spread opened at, and lost both times by a combined 56. So that is something that is absolutely wild to me, how that ends up happening. And it's not like this New Mexico State team last year was a world beater. They lost 6 games in the regular season. Like I said, it would be one thing if it was this Conference USA team that's just playing way above their weight and they're just kind of right. You know, you'd seen some teams like that, kind of like the 2000s Boise State teams, going to the world, they're just winning all these games, the Peterson years, all that. And, you'd get some teams like that would be better than their weight. And this isn't that team. And I don't think it is good mental gymnastics to try to pretend like it is this team. But we'll talk about Hugh Freeze here for a second, because somebody brought this point up last night. And Hugh Freeze, and okay, I'll get a few points here because these are all kind of related to each other. I tweeted this out, and I very much agree with my take on this. This is Auburn's La Monroe loss. I don't like that. I want to hear everybody say it. I'm not gonna get that. You can say that in hindsight. If Hugh Freeze wins the national championship, or I'll give you this. If Hugh Freeze makes it to the playoffs in 2 years, you can say that. That's totally fine. Can't say that right now. Hugh Freeze has not earned that goodwill at Auburn to make a comparison to a coach that already had a national championship before he got here, Nick Saban, and then won one 2 years after what is probably the Alabama's worst program loss. But Hugh Freeze hasn't done it. Norvell is getting that pass for Jacksonville State because they are in the driver's seat to get in the playoffs this year. And if they don't make it because their quarterback got hurt, obviously wish him nothing but the best from a devastating injury. But you kind of get these passes. Hugh Freeze has now, and anybody that's denying this has got to just kind of come back down to reality. Because of this loss, Hugh Freeze has, the expectations he has to meet are now risen. And this loss doesn't matter. You can't say that. There has to be a point where there's some accountability. And when you have the worst loss in program history, that's got to be there. I'm not saying this is all fire Hugh Freeze, he's on the hot. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that his grace for a turnaround for what he has to do next year and the year following, this always kind of been that, but you got to turn up the heat for that. Hey, you know what? The expectations are higher now because you've burned some of the goodwill you've had by doing this. And a season that otherwise would have been, you win this game, so long as you don't lose by 50 to Alabama, it'd been a success. Is what you needed to be. And there was a very controversial tweet by Justin Lee that a lot of people didn't like. And I'm going to read it out for those that aren't listening. Justin Lee is a sports editor for the OA News. And it was a column. It was a tease to a column that he wrote. I haven't read the column just yet, so sorry, Justin, I'll read it But this was the tweet. Progress erased. Auburn will be looking for a portal QB in December. Auburn will have to shake up its offensive staff after all. And there's more. This is year zero. Or year zero is just that. Now, zero progress. Hugh Freeze will have to try again from scratch. Now, what I do want to kind of give, overall, I agree with this. Now, let me add a little caveat there. And I think, there's Justin, can, especially he's great emotional pieces of time and people's feathers are rustled just because I think it was the football game that got the feathers rustled. And they don't want to hear that right now. Now, progress, short-term progress, and I think this is where the caveat needs to be. Short-term progress was absolutely erased. Where Hugh Freeze's will is still good is the long-term progress seems to be going. The recruiting seems to be going strong. Now, you keep playing with fire like this, it gets worse. And we're going to talk about how this could get worse a little bit more. But short term, you had a very, very low ceiling for what you need to do this season. And you kind of hit the bar, what you need to do for the 4 games. And this was the easiest one you had to win. You lost it. So it's just one of those deals where one wrong can undo a multitude of rights. And that's just the unfortunate reality of life. It doesn't matter how many good things you did, or you do one wrong thing, it just zaps those all away. And he's right in that standpoint. The short term, it's gone. This is not, you can't lose, short of a miracle of beating Alabama or winning a bowl game that was a mismatch, which I don't think, who knows what the bowl game is, only the matchup is, but I don't think at this point you feel great about Alabama. I think it's a 15-point spread as we sit right now, where it opened up at. I don't see how this team keeps it within the spread of Alabama. So you get beaten up by Alabama pretty good, and I just don't see how you hang your hat on this regular season. You were just fortunately lucky that Mississippi State was incredibly down, and Arkansas was way down, further than anybody expected them to be, and then Vandy was just Vandy, and their non-con game was Cal this year. A few little things, Auburn's not making a bowl game this year. Let's say Penn State was this year, not beating them. Let's say Arkansas was moderately close to the hype they were supposed to be up to, probably not beating them either. Mississippi State had beaten you 2 years prior. Luckily, Arnett just torpedoed that program into the ground. So all this context does matter. Now, you do a few things. Can you erase this? Absolutely. But the climb to do this is higher. There's no need to space the steps in your ladder further apart. And that's just what's happening. And anybody who wants to ignore that, because the deal is for this season, the short term, just talking short term here, to matter, you beat this game, you're done. Like I said, you just don't get obliterated by Alabama, you'd hang your hat on it. Now, really, the only way to really turn it around is beat Alabama or keep it really, really, really freaking close. And if they do what Norvell did and get it right next year and hit it in the portal and get the recruiting, people forget about it. It'll still get brought up. It will always be a mark on history, so that kind of sucks. But this isn't necessarily a permanent thing. But does it make the challenge harder? Absolutely. There was no need for this to have happened. So the next step is on recruiting. It's midday Sunday. There is some momentum. Can they keep that one going? Yeah. Recruits see this stuff a little different than the average person, but you definitely, to act like it doesn't matter, you're not doing yourself any favors. Who knows what kind of ripple effects this has? And the problem that you're looking at recruiting is maybe the short-term stuff is already set in stone. Guys are already sold. They're not going to decommit. They're not going to flip. But you've definitely planted a seed of negative recruiting for other coaches. Don't want to do that. And act like other coaches aren't going to use this as leverage against Auburn is crazy. Why would they not? Auburn fans are using it against leverage against themselves. Like, why would negative? Yeah. But the other thing of this is where there's not any data, there's not any interviews, there's not any way to really quantify this, is what about that kid? What about the future high 4-star, 5-star who's in 7th, 8th grade, maybe even 9th grade this year, who's incredibly impressionable by their opinions of teams they want to play for. And they're seeing a game like this and they, woof, that Auburn team's no good. Don't want to play for them. Not really knowing the history of anybody in this. It just very much short term it is right here. And that is imprinted of Auburn. Oh, that's a team that lost to New Mexico State. You're very impressible at that age. Maybe that's a kid that doesn't really want to take your phone call in a few years. No matter how good of a recruiter you are, like, or it's a lot harder of a pitch versus you're having to really chase that kid versus them chasing you. Now, are we really deep in the rabbit hole possibility? Yeah, maybe. Maybe this is all just blown over. But the problem is they have really got to put on a show over the next 2 seasons to make up for this one. A bigger show than they probably would have otherwise. Maybe had they just won this one game. But to act like this doesn't put a little bit more heat, a little bit more pressure, it just kind of is what it is. So they got to do it. They got to close it out in recruiting strong and just do something against Alabama. Don't do this. Do something. Oh, I included the players here. And I guess the other point of what Justin said was the Peyton Thorne quote, the quarterback. I think it's safe to say. Now, am I blaming this on Peyton Thorne? No, not at all. And I've kind of said this take, and I've changed my take on Thorne, and we're going to kind of get it here. Is Peyton Thorne the problem? No. Is Peyton Thorne the solution? Absolutely not. Both can be true. Get a little swig here. Keep the vocal cords fresh. All right. Peyton Thorne in 11 games is now, I believe, 33 yards less than where Robbie Ashford was this time last year. Or for Robbie's total last year, excuse me. So Peyton Thorne has to get 34 yards against the Iron Bowl, and he beats Robbie's total passing. That is not good. Now, his percentage is much higher, of course. 64.9%, fine. Think we take it. But the volume of yards being as low as it is. Now, you can blame chicken and egg. Is it receivers? Is this and that? Is it coaching? Yeah, we've had that debate 100 times over. But at the end of the day, the raw numbers are what they are. And Thorne did not get it done. The receiving situation is better than it was last year. Maybe not by much, but it's better. It's deeper. There's more talented, more experienced talent, whatever. I think Rivaldo would be better than Shanker for sure. Jay Fair is in fashion. Farr is back. Jarquez is catching balls. And then you got some just other guys in there. Just the worst are exactly what they were last year. So, and the line's better. Mind we add that. But I don't see how you can look at this situation with Thorne and not at the very least bring somebody in to compete with him. I think he may just decide I'm gonna try this somewhere else. I don't think it's lost either way, but the reset button for the roster, which I think originally even in midseason was like, all right, we're going to try to do less transfers. I think it's got to be a massive. I think you got to hit a massive reset. Coaching situation, I don't even know what you do there, but I think the coaching deal is going to have to look a lot different as well. I am shocked to say, this game was definitely on Roberts. I think the time possession on this was 38 minutes. You let New Mexico State have the ball for 38 minutes. How in the world does that even happen? And I've ranted about Auburn's time of possession situation. But woo, buddy. That ain't going to cut it. Already went over the penalties deal. The only player I really felt like, and I'll give one on each side. Hot take here. Peyton Thorne actually played with some hustle. It reminded me a lot of, I believe it was 2014 Nick Marshall versus Georgia, and that was after the butt fumble game. And I think the entirety of Auburn just gave up because we're not in the playoffs. We could have been And everybody, I'm using my phrase again, was playing with peanut butter in their shoes. Nick Marshall was like the only player that actually he snapped the ball with some hustle to try to do something. And I feel like Peyton Thorne was trying to do it too. Line wasn't playing great. He was just doing anything he could. Now, did he really do much? No, not really. He was at least, it looked like there was at least effort, like he wanted to. And there was facial expressions of hey, can we do this? Yeah, the rushing stuff was crazy. 17 carries of just scrambling, just to try to get little tic tacky yards here or there, just trying to just trying to make the play. 15 for 19 passing is fine, but I think there were a lot more passing calls that were called that he had to scramble out of. So who knows what the original uh, deal was. Like I said, we don't have any advanced stats in front of me, just shooting from the hip on this one. Receiving, same kind of deal, kind of spread the ball out, same story. It's always been there. Jay Fair, I know, got a target or two, didn't come down with one. There were some oddly, I will say this, the one thing I will say on the quarterback play, there's some oddly timed deep balls that didn't make much sense to me. Like there was that one, I believe it was 3rd and 6, and they just sent a bomb down to Malcolm Johnson Jr. That was pretty well covered too. It wasn't like he was just wide open and broke coverage. That was heading toward the north end zone. So I guess maybe that would have been in like the 3rd quarter, question mark. That one was very confusing. Like it just get 6 yards or get 5 and go for it on 4th. I don't know. Burton got those catches in garbage time. I think a lot of people were, oh, he's running slow. It was kind of hard to tell from where I was at, but anyway. The only player on defensive side, and I would say probably the most overall that I felt like was playing with any fire that was all over the place was Keontae Scott. And I felt that watching the game. And then I kind of looked at the stats and he did lead in tackles. So I was like, okay, well, that feeling seems to be backed up. Defense, woo, buddy. I mean, this loss is on them. I mean, New Mexico State got 31 points. I already mentioned the time possession situation. This was a defensive. Sorry, wasn't even 38 minutes. It was 38:50. So it's really 39 minutes. So I mean that means Auburn had the ball for 41. Okay, that's insane. So that means nearly they had the ball for 3.5 quarters, and Auburn had it for maybe 1.5. Less than that. 3rd down efficiency, Auburn was 2 for 10. We've been over that. I mean, it was just the formula that they've had in every loss. The stuff is just the same. 213 yards, nothing, not even 65 rushing, and I think 38 of those were Peyton. Couldn't get anything going on the ground. I mean, it was lost in the trenches for sure. The like I said, but it was just the defense, and we'll look in stats, and there'll be more things that come out of this. But the defense couldn't get anything going. And I'm shocked because of Roberts overall has done well, and yeah, I mean, it's Monty's had his issues, and you just kind of you're only the loss for words for it. So that's kind of the shoot from the hip reactions of everything. I'm sure there's more. There'll be more. Unfortunately, this probably won't be the last time we talk about this. I'll at least try to end in some positive note here because it's been a pretty depressing episode. If you love Auburn, it just is what it is. Is this the end all be all? No. Does this mean the sky is falling? No. Is this incredibly embarrassing? Yeah, it is. Does it make the challenge? Does it make the turnaround harder, longer, further, whatever analogy you want to look for it? Yeah, I think it does. I have a really hard time thinking that this doesn't kind of come around to haunt you a little bit more. Does it mean it's insurmountable? Absolutely not. Does it mean it's going to kill recruiting momentum? Not at all. But can it have an effect? I'm sure it might. We don't know yet. But I think you are living in delusion if you think, oh, this isn't going to hurt anything recruiting long or short term. It might. It might not. Maybe it will in a way or wait. We don't know. But you don't do this. There's a reason you don't play with fire because you might get burned. There's a reason you don't lose these games because of what they might have. And people out there comparing this to, oh, well, is this loss or that loss, whatever. Don't do that. If you get beat up by a 3rd grader, or you get it beat up by a 4th grader, it doesn't matter. It's still bad either way. I would say for most people, it's probably best to just take this one without any sort of justification or comparison. That's just my advice out there from some stuff I've been seeing. Don't compare it to Jacksonville State. Don't compare it to Utah State, Georgia State, La Monroe, any of that. It was all bad. And 21 points, like I said, this wasn't some last-minute field goal, especially second half. They scored 21 points second half. Just absolutely dominated Auburn in the second half of the game at home. Second half game was at night. But anyway, sorry. I said optimism, didn't I? You do something in the Iron Bowl, and I'm not saying necessarily win, but just do something. You get whatever bowl game you get it, you get your recruiting momentum. You can put this one behind you. You come out next year guns blazing with this new SEC schedule. People definitely forget. There's got to be changes, and I think the issue here with Hugh Freeze, and I did forget to kind of bring this up earlier, and I said, "Oh, this is what somebody said last night." Is Hugh Freeze something he has to do to kind of get past his hump, his next level? Is he has got to get it to he's got to take it to the next level on this standpoint. Hugh Freeze is that guy who'll win that big game. He's done it at Ole Miss. He's done it at Liberty. But somebody brought this up last night, not in an Auburn fan base. I might have had this outside looking in. This even Ole Miss people and other fan bases. Both of them said this. Said Hugh Freeze is the guy who's also losing the dumb game. That is something Hugh Freeze, if he wants to have a future at Auburn, if he wants to be a coach that is going to be having some major playoff promises and hopes, this is something he's got to get fixed. 2014, they beat Alabama spectacularly. The game that shocked the SEC. They lose to unranked Arkansas 30-0 at the end of that season. Okay. Then they lose in a bowl game to TCU 42-3. Obviously, last year he lost to the same New Mexico State team after beating Arkansas that he had no business doing there. Same deal, 2015, he beats Alabama again, shook up the world. What does he do later that season? Loses to Memphis, a team that Auburn beats in a bowl game that year. Ole Miss had 2 losses that year. They were ranked number 3 at one point. They lost to number 25, or ranked top 25 Florida. And then 2 weeks later, they had 3 losses, excuse me. Then they lose to Memphis. No business losing to those teams. Okay. And then the following year, I'm trying to see if he had a big win there. Oh yeah, duh. Beats number 12 Georgia that year. And then what do? Loses to Vanderbilt. That's when he said, "Oh, we always had trouble playing Vanderbilt." And the pattern kind of goes on there and continues. So that is something that Hugh Freeze, I don't know why that pattern has been there. You can argue all coaches have this and another, whatever it may be. But the problem is I think this goes along. I think the one difference here is Hugh Freeze doesn't have a marquee victory like those other years. He didn't have a ranked win, but he definitely has a horrifically embarrassing marquee loss. So for him to get over that hump and be that guy that Auburn wants him to be, needs him to be, thinks he is in some cases by others, that's a pattern of history he has got to put behind him. And I don't know if that is he's looking too far ahead. Maybe it's focusing on recruiting. I don't know what the cause of that is, but there's some type of pattern there that it's not like these are, he got beat by a team. It was like he's getting beat by teams he has no business losing to, but showing that he's got the ability to beat teams that he had no business beating. We haven't seen that. Granted, maybe we can do this against Alabama, and then we'll really be having this conversation. Maybe it'll be a bowl game matchup that isn't supposed to be won, but wow. So that was something somebody brought up last night, and it's like I kind of forgot about that, but like, oh yeah, that is true. So anyway, we're going to close up this episode. Obviously, I want to thank our show guests, Opelika Rage Room. They did a promotion this weekend after the loss. They have $5 off for all participants. I feel like some people kind of needed it after this loss. And this is most definitely the best time to go see a Rage Room. They did remind everybody, hey, you can celebrate after a win. But they said if you need them after a loss, whether you're in the Birmingham area, go see Birmingham Rage Room or Opelika area. Go check them out. If you need to write New Mexico State on some plates and bash them, they'll definitely give you a Sharpie. I want to thank them as always for sponsoring the show. That's going to conclude it for today. We will be back with our regular guest. This is by far, I think, a record solo. Shoot from the hip. Had a lot more to talk about than I would have thought. I want to thank everybody for listening. If you made it this far, props to you. This was a tough one to listen to. It was a tough one to do, but just some things got to be said. I would just everybody kind of keep your head up. They'll get through it. The rebuilding process is ugly. If they do what they're supposed to do in the rebuilding process, this will be in the rearview mirror. Brighter days to come ahead. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with you with a regular guest rotation tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day.